Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope your week is going well and you are doing wonderful. This week we will continue to talk about the message, but this time we're going to conceptualize it as a conversation, and we will turn our attention to the interactive nature of communication. And we will first start with the theories about managing uncertainty and anxiety. And in this category, we will first look at the uncertainty reduction theory. Uncertainty reduction theory addresses how we gain information about others. It deals with what and when and how much we need to know about the other individuals when we communicate with them. As a general rule, this theory suggests that the less we know about the other person, the less certain and more anxious we feel about communicating with that person. It says that our need to know is related to the goal of communication. As the example in your book makes it clear, we may only want to or need to know about the skills of the plumber we hired to fix our sink. But if that plumber sees the sign that we have a room for rent and becomes interested in it, then our need to know more about that person may increase. In most cases, we have two basic needs. One, we would like to be able to predict the other person's behavior or guess it. And two, we would like to be able to understand that behavior. Depending on our communicative goal, the significance of the situation, and the significance of the other person for us, our need to know and predict can go up and down. We employ specific strategies to gain information about the other person so we can reduce the uncertainty and anxiety we're feeling. And these strategies range all the way from passive to interactive strategies. So when we use this theory, we first identify and analyze the need, then identify and analyze the strategies the individual is using to gain that necessary information. Anxiety uncertainty management theory, on the other hand, helps us study different ways different cultures seek to reduce uncertainty and anxiety. The less we know, the more anxious we are in communication situations. Consequently, we all try to reduce uncertainty, especially in the initial stages of our relationships, but different cultures do this in different ways. This theory teaches us that high context cultures rely on the contextual and nonverbal cues to gather information and to interpret the communicative acts of others. Low context cultures, on the other hand, rely on explicit verbal messages. The fun begins when a person from a high context culture tries to communicate with a person from a low context culture. The person from the high context culture would look for nonverbal cues, contextual cues, to gather information and to interpret the situation and to understand the other person and his behavior. But most of the time, he would not be able to get this information because the low context culture person he is communicating with would not rely on the contextual and nonverbal cues as much as he does. Consequently, he would not deliver such messages as often. So a scholar using this theory will first identify the strategies employed to gain information in a specific culture. And then the scholar will study how these different strategies impact the effectiveness of communication in a given intercultural communication situation. This theory will help us say things like, person A is from China. China is a high context culture. In that culture, people employ these strategies to gain information. Person B is from the U.S. The U.S. is a low context culture. In that culture, people employ these strategies to gain information. The communication between person A and B failed because strategy X or Y failed to convey the necessary information to the other party. Communication accommodation theory is one of the most influential behavioral theories of communication. It explains how, why we adjust our communicative behavior to the behaviors of others. For example, we would not talk to a 5-year-old the same way we would talk to an adult, right? And this theory helps us explain and study why and how we adjust our behavior. Adjustment of communicative behavior according to this theory occurs in 2 ways: convergence and divergence. Convergence is mimicking the person's behavior or communication style or communication pattern. Divergence is exaggerating the differences. So while convergence de-emphasizes the difference, divergence exaggerates those differences. We converge when we want to create closeness. We diverge when we want to put a space between ourselves and the other person or make a statement of identity. Convergence or divergence can be mutual, both parties can converge or diverge, or non-mutual, only one of them can converge. It could be partial or it could be complete also. A doctor will converge, for example, when she wants to be understood by her patient, when she wants to gain her trust or gain her compliance. She would not talk to her patient in the same way and with the same vocabulary that she would talk to her colleagues. So she would bring the information down to her patient's level. By observing the same doctor interacting with her patients and with her colleagues, and by comparing her behavior, we can determine what strategies she employs to adjust her communication behavior and style, and we can study what she does not, how she does it, and why she does it, and if it works. There are many variations of communication accommodation theory, of course, and you can take a look at them in your book, but this basic premise remains the same in all of them. Now we will move on to the sociocultural tradition. The first theory we will look at is symbolic interactionism. We talked about this theory before, so we will mention it briefly here. Symbolic interactionism, as you all know, develops the idea that people form meaning and structure in society through conversations. In other words, through symbolic interactions. Frequent and repetitive actions and interactions create patterns that have established meanings for people. These patterns are regarded as structures in this theory. The self, mind, and society are important concepts in this theory. They all are a part of what is called the social act. The self consists of the I and me. The I is the impulsive and unpredictable part of the self. The me is the part that controls and guides our social behaviors. The I may want to keep the money in the wallet he found on the street, but the me would tell him to take that wallet to the nearest police station. So the me is the controlling, organizing, guiding part of the self. The mind is about thinking. Thinking is a process. Thinking is nothing more than interacting with yourself. This is how we think through situations and plan our future actions. Society is a network of interactions in which individuals assign meanings to their own and others' actions. Meanings in this network are created by repetitive interactions among people. In other words, meanings are socially created, socially constructed. And a scholar who uses this theory would try to identify and analyze those socially constructed meanings. He or she would study how people come together and converge to share a meaning. The marijuana and ethnicity examples in the book are good examples of how people create shared meanings. The face negotiation theory helps us examine how people will accomplish face work in different cultures. Face refers to one's self-image, and face work to communication behaviors people use to build and protect their own or other people's images. As the definition makes it clear, face work can be directed at the self or the others. We call this the locus of face work, and it is the first thing we pay attention to when we use this theory. The second thing we pay attention to is to whether a person's actions are positive or negative. This is called the face valence. The third concept is whether the communication is designed to prevent the loss of face in the future or restore loss of face that has already happened. This is called temporality. The type of face work is another thing that we pay attention to when we use this theory. There are two types of face work, preventative and restorative. Preventative face work involves communication designed to protect a person's image in front of others. Restorative face work is designed to rebuild one's face after loss occurs. Face is a universal concern, but how it is defined and how face work is accomplished varies from one person to another and from one culture to another. In individualistic cultures, face work is generally directed to the self. In collectivistic cultures, it is directed at others. The second cultural concept affecting face work is power distance. High power distance cultures tend to be hierarchical. In these cultures, the face work tends to be done indirectly, collaboratively, and is directed at other individuals. In low power distance cultures, on the other hand, face work tend to be directed to the self and done in more direct fashion or direct manner. Job applications, job interviews, and cover letters are a good example of it. In the U.S., we are expected to do our own face work and explicitly talk about our own accomplishments. In collectivistic and high-power distance cultures like China, other people are expected to do our face work on our behalf. Now we're going to start talking about the rhetorical tradition. As you saw in your books, the first theory mentioned under this tradition is symbolic convergence theory. This theory is also called fantasy theme analysis, and it shares a lot with Burke's dramatism and Fisher's narrative paradigm. Since we talked about them in length before, I won't focus on this theory in this lecture, but you can definitely read about it in your books and, study it. It's a fun theory to look at. It teaches us how to identify and analyze the characters, plot, scene, agents in the stories of our daily lives. Here, instead, we will focus on a new theory called invitational rhetoric. Invitational rhetoric offers a new perspective to rhetoric. It critiques the overemphasis placed on persuasion in rhetorical theory. It sees persuasion as a kind of violence. By using the literal and metaphorical idea of an invitation as a conversational mode, this theory offers a new way of studying interactions. It determines 4 different types of rhetoric: conquest rhetoric, conversation rhetoric, benevolent rhetoric, and advisory rhetoric. Conquest rhetoric is an interaction in which winning is the goal. Conversation rhetoric is designed to change others' perspectives or behaviors based on the superiority or rightness of a position. In benevolent rhetoric, information is typically provided to others with the aim of benefiting them in some ways. Advisory rhetoric, on the other hand, is where requested information is provided to someone. Describing the current cultural climate as an argument culture, where we approach almost every conversation as if it were a fight, this theory suggests a change in our perspective and attitude toward rhetoric and communication. According to this theory, 4 basic requirements in creating an environment for invitational rhetoric are freedom, safety, value, and openness. So when we use this theory, we evaluate the statements made from these vantage points. We ask ourselves, does the individual have the freedom to openly state his or her ideas? Does he or she feel safe while doing so? Is his or her idea valued? And is the speaker or the listener or listeners open and receptive to these ideas? The last theory we will discuss from Chapter 5 is the co-cultural theory from the critical tradition this week. Co-cultural theory is a theory about the conversations between marginalized groups and the members of the dominant society. Marginalized groups are called co-cultural groups. These are the groups with lower power status in our society. This theory is designed to facilitate understanding of how marginalized group members negotiate their cultural differences with others. It makes 5 assumptions. First, the existing social hierarchy privileges certain groups. In this case, it is referring to the dominant culture and its members. Dominant members occupy power positions that enable them to create and maintain systems that reinforce their perspectives and mute others. Dominant communication systems keep co-cultural group members outside the centers of power. While there is a considerable variation across co-cultures, they share a marginalized social position within the dominant system. And lastly, co-cultural group members strategically communicate to negotiate the dominant system in which that they find themselves. So when we use this theory, we specifically focus on the communication between the dominant and marginal groups and study how marginal groups strategically negotiate the meanings within the dominant system. One example of such negotiation is how feminist women have appropriated the B word. The B word has long been used as a derogatory term to refer to the powerful, ambitious, argumentative, competitive, and outspoken woman, especially in the work life, right? Now we see that many women have appropriated the word with a new and positive meaning. It doesn't surprise us to see today or to hear some women using it in their daily lives, in their daily conversations, to refer to themselves or to the other woman that they admire. Of course, when they use it with this new and positive meaning attributed to it, not with the derogatory meaning.